Story 1. When I was 23, I had an abortion. It has caused me a great deal of emotional pain over the years. I would never support banning it, not in a million years. The case of non-viable pregnancies alone is horrifying. Story 2. If I were American and anything other than a white, heterosexual, cisgender man, I would get out of there as fast as I could. At minimum, I would move to a deep blue state and hope the Republican Party never again comes anywhere near the White House. Story 3. I am angry. I am pregnant and want this baby, but I do not want to risk dying for it. Story 4. I do not feel well. I am a police officer. I will not enforce the laws that were recently enacted in Oklahoma. Someone else can handle enforcement. I will not put handcuffs on someone for having an abortion, being in a same-sex relationship, or being married to a person of the same sex. I will gladly lose my job over this. In 10 years, we will see a large increase in the crime rate as children are forced to be born into poverty, which I believe is what the government desires. More people born into poverty will increase the pool of low-wage workers, which may temporarily sustain Social Security for another 10 years. Low income increases crime, and the cycle continues. Things are bleak. If this is the hill on which I lose everything, so be it. Story 5. As someone who lives in Missouri, the populated non-bumblefuck part, I'm hella fucking pissed off. I'm pissed that this happened and that the place I love is about to be dragged because of things only yokels vote for. I'm pissed for every woman I've ever called a friend, and I am at a loss for what I'm supposed to do now. But the anger is fucking real. Story 6. If a woman cannot abort a baby she does not want, a man does not get to walk away from a baby he does not want either. Story 7. Children should not be killed in the womb. They should be killed in the classroom. Guns are a basic human right, and access to healthcare is not. Story 8. I am deeply saddened to realize that police officers will not protect living, breathing children in dangerous situations at school, but will devote 100% of their resources to track down a woman who had an abortion. I turned off notifications for this post. There are too many people commenting out of anger instead of thinking. Thank you to everyone with real, constructive responses. Story 9. Although I am not American, I will watch the aftermath as it unfolds with some anxiety. This flavor of insanity is often contagious. Story 10. I think I am having a panic attack. At the end of last week, I was told my pregnancy is unlikely to be viable, but there is still a heartbeat. I do not know what this will change for me in the next few days. I have an appointment at 1 o'clock to determine whether we need to terminate, but now I am not sure what options I have. I am so scared and angry. Story 11. This is just the start. Justice Clarence Thomas wrote today that contraception and same-sex marriage are next. The court is giving you guns but taking away everything else. Story 12. I feel the urge to leave and move to a state or even another country that aligns with my beliefs about women's constitutional right to abortion. I am angry, sad, and scared. Being a woman in this country is becoming a living nightmare. Story 13. As a healthcare worker, this is going to be a nightmare. I'm legitimately scared about what lengths people will go to without safe options for birth control. Our healthcare system is stretched thin as it is, and emergency medicine is a rubber band barely holding it together. I do not like the implications of how this can potentially break something so fragile, especially after the fallout of the coronavirus disease 2019 pandemic. Story 14. If you think only women are affected by the abortion ban, you are wrong. Forcing babies into poverty will increase crime rates, because children and adults with low economic status have more incentive to join gangs and commit crimes. Imagine trying to buy a house or get a job with all of the extra competition in this difficult economy. Imagine trying to have a child with your wife, but medical complications make the fetus non-viable, requiring an abortion, and she dies for no reason. People you know will be affected and may die or suffer immensely as a result. This affects the entire country in a very negative way. You might think this will not affect you because most of us never lived in a reality where abortion was banned federally. All it takes is bad luck for it to affect you. Story 15. I feel like I am watching my country fail in real time at an accelerating speed. Story 16. I grew up in the Bible Belt, and overturning Roe v. Wade was one of the most prominent talking points from politicians campaigning in the area. The dog caught the car. I did not think it would happen. What will they run on now? I am kind of afraid to find out. Story 17. To those not thinking about the impact abortion bans will have on the living, breathing women and existing families of this nation. Overall, 23. 7% of women have had an abortion since Roe v. Wade was decided. That number has dropped to around 18% for women in recent years due to better availability of contraception and more complete sexual education, even via the internet. If you truly care about reducing abortion, this is where to concentrate your effort. Those wanting Roe v. Wade overturned and abortion criminalized are in the minority, about 20 to 30%. This prohibition is not the will of the people. Those who think their lifestyle means it can never happen to them, look around. Every fourth woman you see has made the choice to end a pregnancy. In your church, in your school, in your friend group, in your family. Maybe you are lying to protect yourself. We all know why. It happens all the time. Even the women protesting outside clinics. Roughly the same number of women today have miscarriages as have abortions. Miscarriages can look like botched abortions. Miscarriages often require a dilation and curettage to protect the woman from sepsis and other complications. A dilation and curettage is a medical abortion procedure. If you think your wife, your daughter, or yourself will be treated well by medical personnel because not me, I suggest you read some of the pre-Roe v. Wade horror stories. About 40% of women will be directly and negatively impacted by this intrusion. None of those 40% owe you a single cell of their body. At any given time, there are over 100,000 children waiting to be adopted in the United States. There is no shortage of children to adopt. The women most likely today to have abortions are those most in need. Women living in poverty, often women of color in their 20s or 30s, often already parenting, who lack access to decent healthcare, education, or contraception, who work constantly and still need assistance just to feed the children they have. These are the women most impacted. The United States has the worst maternal mortality rate of the developed world. Women of color die at 3 times the rate of white women. For those thinking, I don't want to pay for, you already pay for it one way or another. As a community, we all do. The only question is whether the community spends to educate and lift everyone up, or whether the community spends to shame, demonize, and imprison those with the least. Note to self, invest in privatized women's prisons. It will soon be boom time. The clerk checking out your 99-cent plastic bowl at Walmart is likely working as many jobs and hours as possible only to still need public assistance to feed their children, and then gets shamed for needing help. Before starting any back-in-my-day stories, think about what it would have been like for you 30 or 40 years ago if you instead made $70 for every 100. What if you had no family to help? I remember taking $20 and a calculator to the grocery store to feed us for an entire week because that was all I had. Now take that $20 away and another 100 for good measure. That's where today's poor live. Walmart recorded record profits, thanks in part to the corporate welfare of low wages, low or no taxes, and an economic system manipulated to allow the wealth of an entire nation to be siphoned off into private hands. Story 18. This will not stop abortions. It will stop safe abortions. Edit. Why am I getting all these replies about gun control? Story 19. I feel terribly sorry for the waves of unwanted children that are forthcoming. Story 20. Maybe it is messed up to say, but I am glad my mother, who marched for women's rights and fought for social justice, is not alive to see this. Story 21. All those who insisted the vaccine was their choice and that the government could not force them to take it now have to take it, since the government apparently controls their bodies. Story 22. I feel angry and betrayed. The wording of the ruling clears the way for other rights to be done away with in the same manner. A direct quote from their ruling states. Next, the court examines whether the right to obtain an abortion is rooted in the nation's history and tradition, and whether it is an essential component of ordered liberty. The court finds that the right to abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions. Guess what else, from their standpoint, fits that criteria? Lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, and other identities and rights. I give it a month, at most 6 months, before the Supreme Court of the United States has a case on its docket that deals with those rights, such as marriage. I feel the writing is on the wall about how this court will rule. I already live in a state with a trigger law about abortion. Abortion in my state will become nearly illegal within 30 days. The only abortions that will be legal are in the case of life-threatening pregnancies. My state is already trying to find loopholes in the law to discredit same-sex marriage. As a lesbian, I do not like the writing on the wall. I have less to worry about regarding abortion rights, though I am still very angry that an important right has been effectively taken away for many women, but this ruling does not bode well for the future. Story 23. I doubt this comment will be seen, given that nearly 4,000 comments have already been made, but the reasoning used to justify this decision is more worrying than the decision itself. It is bad enough that the door is open to outlawing abortion, but the reasoning used to justify overruling a prior Supreme Court decision can be used to roll back nearly anything. It does not matter that the opinion says this reasoning should not apply to other situations. That is not how precedent works. The court has set a precedent that decisions can be rolled back if they do not conform to an arbitrary interpretation of what the Constitution originally guaranteed. That can be applied to almost anything. The court can always say, "This makes sense this time, not next time. We promise we will not do it again." It is no wonder people have little confidence in the Supreme Court now. Note: I encourage people to read at least the syllabus of the full Supreme Court decision. It is short and lays out the reasoning. Regardless of your feelings about the outcome, it is valuable to understand the arguments and form your own view. The dissents are worth reading as well. Clarification. I want to be clear because some critics seem to be misunderstanding my point. I am not arguing that the problem is merely that the court overturned precedent. The court itself notes that Plessy v. Ferguson was overturned early in the opinion. I know the Supreme Court has overturned decisions before. My point is that the reasoning used here is insidious. The idea of implicit rights underlies many rights we now enjoy, such as the right to privacy. This decision calls that reasoning into question, potentially opening the door to overturning many earlier rulings using this opinion as justification. Story 24. It amazes me how passionately America cares for unborn children and simultaneously could not care less about living, breathing children who are shot and killed on a weekly basis. It seems children's lives only matter in the womb. Or maybe, just maybe, this is the ugly face of the subtle epidemic of misogyny. I wonder how many of these pro-lifers will be willing to register to adopt. I have a feeling that if all those pro-lifers were required to adopt the children who would otherwise be given up, they would quickly become pro-choice. People's opinions change when an issue begins to affect their own lives. Story 25. I refuse to believe that rich women will be affected by this. They will always have options. This is another attack on the poor. Story 26. I scheduled my vasectomy appointment this morning. I do not plan to, and I do not want it ever to be possible to get another person pregnant. Story 27. I'm a straight, white, Christian man, and I'm angry. The only places in my book that mention abortion are HowTos. Rabbinic scholars, who know far more about Old Testament law than many fundamentalist televangelists and lawmakers do, have long held that life begins at breath, not at conception. A man who causes a woman to miscarry is sentenced to pay a fine, equal to loss of property, not loss of life. I am disgusted by members of my faith who disobey both God and their nation by mixing church and state, giving to God what belongs to Caesar. It is not going to hurt me personally, but I was taught to care for those unlike me, not to make their lives difficult. I reject this. Edit. This will affect me personally. I wanted to emphasize that we should not support human rights only when we personally benefit from them. Rights matter even when we do not personally benefit. I am not gay, but I want my gay friend to have the right to marry the person they choose. Second edit. Please do not praise me simply for having opinions. There are local women in your area who will need funds to cover the cost of out-of-state trips to obtain abortion care. Donate to those causes. Story 28. No access to abortion, no health care, no maternity leave, and no affordable housing. School violence is widespread. Police have too much power and almost no accountability. Lobbying dominates. America feels like a premium third world. Story 29. Women will die, and you will be told that they deserve it. Story 30. Our fertility doctor has informed us that he will no longer provide services to my wife and me because of the higher chance of needing a medically necessary abortion. Any pregnancy that might result in a stillbirth would now legally be required to be carried to full term. In his medical opinion, this is far too dangerous for my wife's health. I feel intense rage. Story 31. I feel that religious morals and posturing have no place in government. This will not go well. Story 32. Texas is about to become a very bad place for anyone who is civilized and open-minded. Letting the current legislature go all out now that they can hide behind a states' rights argument will be frightening. For the first time in my life, leaving is on the table. It is a shame, since I was educated at the University of Texas and am a sixth-generation Texan, but the rural minority here has been given permission to act on its worst impulses. I am leaving. Story 33. I feel like I'm being held hostage by extremists who are only in it to fill their wallets while hiding behind religion. Story 34. I feel sick to my stomach. I would never have thought this settled law would be overturned, but here we are. I have a daughter and I am raising her in a state that is mainly red. I am a teacher for children with special needs, and I expect my caseload to skyrocket over the next decade. Story 35. I am pretty furious. The Republicans are doing everything in their power to halt any kind of progress in the United States. We have all these checks and balances in place that Republicans use with malicious intent because they know the Democrats will not reciprocate. The fact that the Supreme Court is so conservative now because of political maneuvering by some senators makes my blood boil. Obama. I want to confirm this justice 8 months before I leave office. McConnell. Whoa. That is not enough time to do our due diligence, and it does not look good. It seems like you are forcing a progressive into the position. I will not allow the vote to happen under these circumstances. For years past, Ruth Bader Ginsburg dies just before the election. McConnell. We are not leaving this room until our preferred choice is confirmed. Story 36. To everyone feeling burnout, tired, or exhausted. Please read these words from a comment I saved a while back by the user The Birmingham Bear. Support the women in your lives, your family, your coworkers, your children, the stranger in the grocery store. It's time to show your unapologetic support. I would like to add, as many have already heard, that exhaustion is the point. They flood us with terrible news, terrible events, and propaganda to make the most vicious and cruel among us appear like kings. Unstoppable, undefeatable. A tyrant's greatest weapon is the ability to instill fear and despair. Look across history. Consider all the horrific acts, the authoritarian regimes, the dictators who appeared to be indomitable gods, until suddenly they were not. I know it's hard, but I cannot emphasize enough the power of even a single optimist. Hope is infectious. Authoritarians seek to control our perception of reality, and they are very skilled at it. But just one individual in someone's life who is a beacon of hope and positivity can have profound ripple effects on their community. Despair is the enemy. Without despair, there is life and action. In bad times, you must act. In good times, you must act. We live, undoubtedly, under a curtain of misery and fear. Authoritarians are on the rise everywhere. The single best way to combat them is to refuse despair. No matter how dire the news makes the world seem, do not despair. Encourage action, vigilance, and, most importantly, love and community. It isn't easy. Sometimes it takes everything. But nothing you can do with your life is more noble than to be a stalwart defender against despair and hopelessness. To be the person who, even in the darkest hour, inspires others to turn on their light as well. There are more of us than there are of them, which is why they put all their energies into making people seem small, weak, and divided. They are trying to salt the earth, to take away what makes life rich and worth fighting for, to make you believe this world is dark and doomed and not worth defending. By being someone who inspires hope, by being that rock, that anchor, that beacon, you give others the strength to keep getting up, to keep taking action, to keep fighting back. No one could run a 4-minute mile until someone did. After that, everyone could. We look to those people who shine. We take our strength from them. They offer us an alternative to the climate of fear and terror around us. They give us a different path. They will tell you it's pointless. They will tell you it's hopeless. They will tell you to give up. They will mock you, spit on you, and demean and degrade you. They are terrified of the person who does not despair. If you do not allow them to win that battle, you have already taken the greatest step toward victory. Story 37. I feel like I would be placed on several watch lists. Story 38. I am pretty angry and betrayed, yet somewhat relieved that my state guarantees it as a right and an incremental part of my health. My heart goes out to those who live in states hostile to abortion rights. Story 39. I feel there should be a general strike throughout the United States. I believe we should shut the country down until they reverse the decision. Story 40. I hope women start leaving babies at the Supreme Court. Land of the free, I guess. Story 41. The rise of Christian nationalism will continue to erode the nation. That, together with the oligarchy, will accelerate its decline. Story 42. Betrayed as an American. We cannot have progress in this country because a very small, rich, and powerful minority treats a 2,000-year-old book as law, which they consistently misquote or misrepresent. Edit. I know the Bible was not quoted in the decision. The conservative justices are too smart to overrule on pure religious pretext. But you are an absolute idiot with your head in the sand if you think their faith played no role in this being overturned after it had been a judicial precedent for more than 30 years. Story 43. It is a sad day in America. We are going backwards, and I honestly believe that America is not as great a country as it thinks it is. Story 44. I feel physically ill. This is one of the worst days for American democracy in the past century. Story 45. You're a fucking bastard if you support this ruling. If you don't want an abortion, don't get one. Don't fucking cheer Christian fundamentalists into office or the Supreme Court to enact a national ban. You're an especially cruel fucking monster if you can't even allow an exception for rape or incest, especially if the victim is a young child. Story 46. Why do we still deny healthcare to women as if it is the Dark Ages? Story 47. It's a betrayal of all women. Abortion is healthcare. Women will die because of this decision. The Handmaid's Tale was supposed to remain fiction. America has become a bad place. Story 48. The rest of the world still thinks you're a joke, but we aren't laughing anymore. Story 49. I am confused about how this effort is spearheaded by a party that does not want the government to interfere in Americans' daily lives. Story 50. I feel like a line has been crossed. In United States politics, there are issues that neither party solves so they can keep their bases riled up. Abortion is one of those major issues. No one is supposed to do anything of consequence. That has been the general rule in Washington, District of Columbia, for the past several generations. Now I feel it is open season on all sorts of wedge issues. Story 51. America is imploding. Civil war seems more likely every year. At what point do the beaten down finally rise up and demand what is right? How can so few people have such strong influence? It is mind-boggling. Story 52. This is a sad day for the United States. Many women will suffer and die because of the decision by the Supreme Court of the United States. I am shocked and numb. When it was announced, I sat at work and cried for the rights that have been stripped away from women in the United States. Story 53. We need to organize a mass strike. Enough of this bullshit already. Story 54. Defeated. I feel like my vote doesn't matter, that it never mattered. Land of the free is an absolute joke. Story 55. I want every person who supports this decision to remember what they say and think today. When, not if, their daughter or granddaughter has an unwanted pregnancy. I want them to remember this day and watch the hopelessness in her eyes. When she must give up hopes and dreams because of a forced birth, when she cannot afford essentials because of the cost of prenatal care, when she has health problems from an unwanted pregnancy and forced birth, or when their grandchild is placed in a family that is not prepared mentally or financially to care for the child, I want them to remember this day. When the social supports that should help her utterly fail, I want them to remember this day. I want this day to come back and bite them hard where it hurts. I want them to watch the joy and hope that once filled their daughter's eyes slowly drain away, and know that it was their votes and their decisions that made that happen. I want them to feel the true cost of this victory deep in their souls and be reminded of it every single day. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.